Our next guest is born in South Africa and has an impressive career in transport. He worked for AP Moller-Maersk Group in the past. Now he's responsible for DP World's inland activities in Europe. He joins Flow's editor-in-chief, Bart Timperman, here live on stage. Please give it up for Rob Harrison.
Welcome, Rob. First question, who is Rob Harrison and what's your role in DP World, Inland Logistics?
Okay, wow. Bart, first of all, thanks very much for inviting me. It's a real privilege to be here. I've seen a lot of old friends and a lot of new friends around today, so it's
nice.
really been good fun. Who is Rob Harrison? Maybe I'll tell you the part about the last 18 months. My responsibility now today is to actually look after the intermodal and 2PL businesses for DP World. So the idea behind that is to actually see how we can link from the deep sea terminals where I was active before to the cargo owners. So what we have now in our portfolio, we have 12 different terminals stretching from Germany, Switzerland, France, and the Alsace region in Liège. And then we have a transport organization sitting in Rotterdam as well. So that's really what we're trying to do, is we're trying to build this network of multimodal transport solutions, linking those platforms to where the cargo comes from and goes to. I think also what we've done is we now, as DP World, have a presence in Rotterdam. We have an office in Rotterdam. It's the first time as DP World that we actually have established that. And I think that's also important. Everybody knows DP World in Antwerp, great, and that's there. But I think it was also important to establish a unique brand as DP World in Rotterdam as well. So we're trying to cover that whole sort of hinterland space. So that's a little bit about what Rob Harrison is today.
Yeah, such inland terminals, you have a lot of them, but do you earn money with it?
Do we earn money? Actually, yes. I think when you actually look at some of the financial metrics, some of the better performing inland facilities are getting a EBITDA margin of around 18%. Now that's not the same as the deep sea terminals. The deep sea terminals have a completely different financial model. Right? They have massive volumes that are going through, but they also have a much bigger risk exposure in terms of the actual financial assets invested. But the peer group of 18% on an EBITDA margin for inland facilities is our target. We're not there yet, but we're definitely trending in the right direction. And what we found is that if you can actually scale and that you can get a number of assets together, that helps you. That actually helps you from a portfolio perspective. The more scale you have, the more assets you can utilize your assets better. That helps you to get that return. So we're trending in the right direction. We are making a positive contribution to DP World.
Okay. Multimodality starts at the sea terminal. Sea terminals where the handling of seagoing vessels always get priority. And we often hear the barge operators complain that they have to move because a big ship is coming in, which is bad for their business model. Now you're on the side of the barges. You were at the other side some years ago. Did it change your opinion about it?
No, I think my opinion has always been the same. I've always believed that we need to have a better and a stronger collaborative model across the whole supply chain. I mean, historically, I was also instrumental in the original barge planning project, trying to see how we can link different of the deep sea terminals with the barging community, etc., in Antwerp. So I've always been a big believer in that. Do I experience it? Of course, we experience it right now, because there's still some of these structural problems that exist. We on an average basis, we are running 12 barges a day on our network, right? And there are times, because of the congestion in the deep sea terminals, where we have to deploy 16 barges. And the reason we have to do that is to keep that network going, right? So, of course, in those weeks, then we underperform, and we don't manage to get the return on the assets, right? So, but what we are trying to do is that, when we run a normal week, if we can stretch those utilizations to above the 65% for barging, then you start to actually make returns on barging. Then it starts to work, but then you need to have scale. So yes, we have the same problems. Some weeks are good weeks, and some weeks are not so good weeks. It is a frustration. It is a frustration today still.
And is the solution in only in more space, or isn't there a solution?
No, I think of course, in a perfect world, if we could have everything and Father Christmas was real, we could ask for additional capacity and we could get additional capacity just like that. But one of the challenges we have is, and we need to realize, particularly in Europe, where we have where there's a context of an environmental sustainability consciousness that's coming about, we need to realize that space is not unlimited. Space is finite. It is going to be a finite capacity. So we need to work better together. So of course, if we could just build another 2 kilometers of quay, it will solve the problem. But it would only solve the problem for a finite period, right? But that's not really what we as responsible members of the community should be doing, right? We really do need to look at some of these structural issues. It's who the contracting parties are. How do we work better with across the supply chain? How do we get more information? How do we collaborate on the inland? I think there's been quite a lot of work that's been happening on the inland where we've noticed, of actually working with some of our operational colleagues, our colleagues, right? To actually see, okay, if we work with you, we can get more scale onto these vessels, and that makes sure that we can come to Rotterdam World Gateway or Antwerp Gateway with a barge of 150 boxes, right? So we do need to work better. It's just more space is not, yes, is a solution, but it's not really the sustainable solution.
Mm-hmm. We were talking about complaining barge operators. There are other people complaining, the road hauliers. They don't feel happy about the way they are treated at the deep sea terminals. They say they do not listen to us. Do you understand them?
I mean, I think they're in a similar boat. Excuse the expression, as all of the intermodal 2PL players. There is a degree of frustration with what is perceived as the deep sea terminals, but the deep sea terminals are only a step in the process as well. You also have the shipping lines that are sitting behind that. And every time that a vessel comes out of schedule, or you change the rotation, it causes massive knock-on effects right through the system, right? So, I mean, I've heard that problem for 10, 12, 14 years. I can empathize, but again, it goes down to this point. Capacity is not infinite. It is finite. There can only be so many trucks on a terminal at one time. There can only be so many containers on a terminal at one time. So somehow we actually have to work together much better. So I empathize with them, but they are hurt. But there's a lot of other people that are also out there in the supply chain trying to find a solution.
Mm-hmm. Other modality is rail. Rail is promoted as the most environmentally friendly transport solution, but we don't see really the breakthrough of rail. Can you explain that?
Yes, I think, there have been some successes with rail. And it is actually something that we're pushing as DP World, we're pushing quite strongly. We have 9 trains a week from Swiss terminals coming out of Switzerland into Antwerp and from Ottmersheim. We've also just installed a new rail product, our own rail product from Stuttgart into Rotterdam. So we're seeing growth both on our barge network and on our rail network. It's not at the same pace, and rail is the one area that really does need attention in terms of investments, harmonizing the platforms, making sure that it's efficient to actually run trains on that side. And I think that's where on the policy and the port authorities, etc., that's where they can play much more of an active role. I think there is the opportunity to create more capacity. There is definitely an area of focus for them. I was in Le Havre last week, quite interestingly, and there they have a multimodal facility just behind the Port 2000, and there the rail is electrified right onto the inland terminal, right, which is a multimodal facility, and you can see the electrification right onto the terminal itself. So it's elements like that, that make it much more efficient for rail, and there are some obvious solutions in that. The other challenge is also the imbalances. The product flows in and out. So, nobody ever wants to run empty boxes. And that's a little bit, it's probably a bit more of a critical factor for a rail operation, because there you have 80 slots one way, 80 slots the other way. And it has to run like clockwork. You only get that window. I mean, it's even more rigorous than the deep sea shipping line windows, right? The train runs on Tuesday at 2 o'clock, and it's got to leave at Tuesday at 8 o'clock. And then you've got to be able to fill that window both ways. So the imbalances on equipment and flows is also an issue for rail.
Mm-hmm. Back to the inland ports. You were one of the first with DP World Antwerp to start an inland port in Grobbendonk on the Albert Canal. Must have been 10 years ago, something like that.
2012. Yes.
It wasn't a very good experience because you had a lot of troubles with neighbors, and you had to sell it. Did you learn a lot about it for the investments you do now?
Absolutely. I think we're very, very clear now in terms of what we need when we're actually looking at new initiatives and new investments. And so we're very clear with whomever the authority might be, and we actually go through that process and we say, okay, is that around? Do we have that? Is that there? Is that isn't? Or what's relevant? And I mean, of course, we then factor that into the business models to make sure that we can get the return that we can. So we learned a lot. It hasn't scared us away. Because, I mean, even at that stage, I think we only had 2 inland terminals. We had the one in Grobbendonk and we had the one in Germersheim. And if you actually look at our portfolio today, we now have 12. So, yes, we learned, we exited that one, but the other ones that we have got are all operable, if you like, within the context of that environment. What is quite interesting is if you actually see what's happened within Antwerp now with the solution, this 9-party agreement that has been brokered. I think it's great, and I think that was essential for Antwerp for the ECHO project itself. It would have been really interesting had they done the same thing 12 years ago. Maybe then Grobbendonk would be a different scenario. So I think that's also a lesson to be learned from government and policy makers then. There was a lot of finger pointing, there was a lot of saying, no, this is not my responsibility, it's somebody else's. Yeah. But we learned.
Okay. We have lived an era where we had some competition between Antwerp, Rotterdam. Future-wise, how do you look at it? Is it still good to have that competition, or do we need to think different to be able to build more multimodal solutions?
Fundamentally, I'm a believer in liberal markets. So the less control you can have over the markets, the better. I do think there is an element of collaboration that could be possible, but it needs to be done on an economic basis. You need to make sure that it is not done on a political basis. Because if it's done on a political basis, then the actual motives are different. The drivers are different. If you allow a facilitation on an economic basis, then the economic basis says that you're going to get an optimal allocation of assets, of resources, and you're going to get a return on those. So it keeps it much more competitive. So I think, yes, there is an opportunity for a level of collaboration, but as long as those underlying drivers are not political in nature. So I think that needs to be sacrosanct. You need to be able to compete on an economic basis.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Then you have the whole Fit for 55 story, where there is a lot of ambition about environment. But how do you look at it? Is it easy to reach from the point of view of DP World?
I think, of course, this thing is scary. It's a concern for a lot of players. But I think we need to go back to the fundamentals here. I think this is one area of policy that across the whole of Europe we can all support. It's an initiative in order to actually meet the societal demands to manage the environment, right? So the idea itself, the fundamental concept is the right one. And we have to set ourselves some targets. We have to set ourselves some measurable KPIs. And this is an initiative coming out of Europe. And of course, you know, we've had some good experiences and we've had some bad experiences with Europe. But I think, of course, as Europe is getting more mature itself, the EU, it is also learning how to actually get into dialogue with the constituent players, right? So I think it is good, but I do encourage everybody to actually participate in the process that's ongoing right now. So there are discussions that are going on around the rewriting of the 10T regulations, et cetera. So I encourage everybody to actually participate in that proactively, and let's see how that goes. So, you know, I understand that there are going to be some concerns for us, but as a principle, I'm fully behind it. I think also, I mean, you must remember there are some counterbalancing and checks that are in place, like this carbon border adjustment factor as well. You know, that's a sort of element and a tool that the EU is thinking about that would be able to protect what is actually the business within the EU as well. So I think, you know, we need to look at these things. We need to see how they work out, challenge them if they don't work, but I think we need to give them a try.
Mm-hmm. But Europe is just a collection of nations. Mm-hmm. You have the privilege to work in different countries. Do you seem that the notions are in the same direction in every country, or do you feel a lot of differences in the approaches?
Wow. I think there's about 3 questions in one there.
Yeah, okay.
I'm a supporter of Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I think the more open you can make the economies, the better it is for everybody. Fundamentally, if you go back to history and you see where did we actually, about the current standard of living and our well-being, particularly in Europe, right, has actually come about because we can trade. So we had the container, we had the global treaty on trade and tariffs. You know, eventually we've had the euro, we've had the EU, and actually these are all elements that have facilitated to our standard of living that we experience in Europe today. It is fantastic. It is amazing. Now, even within that constellation, of course there's some challenges. Doing business in France is different from doing business in Antwerp, is different from Rotterdam. So there are still local flavors on how to do business. But I can only encourage that you know, we need to look after this thing, the EU experiment, as they called it. I compare it to the UK, and I think, of course, you know, we will see some of those challenges as the UK carries on in terms of its Brexit ideas, right? It's going to become more and more isolated.
Mm-hmm. Okay. For my last question, I have to read. You have in Jebel Ali, DP World is acting with an experiment with the high bay store system, HBS, where you put containers in a big rack, of how do I have to say it? Yeah. Is it workable? Do you think this concept can come to Rotterdam, to Antwerp, to gain space, or is it just a good fantasy?
No, I think it can. But make be very clear. It's not a cheap solution.
It's expensive.
It is expensive. But where you are space constrained, I think it definitely has some applications. So again, you know, you go back to the earlier discussion around, well, you know, just build more key length for the barges. This will be a potential one of those structural issues that could be used to actually increase the productivity over the quay. Now, I mean, we've looked at it from a DP World perspective. I think there might be, and this is just completely, you know, theoretical. We haven't put any financial numbers behind it, but there is an area at Antwerp Gateway where we could use it, the thin long piece at the end, and in somewhere like in Switzerland, for example, as well, where you have a you know, high price, the utilization and the availability of land is very limited. Then that technology could be used there. But of course, I think we still need a number of years to evolve in this technology when the actual price becomes, the CapEx spend becomes more viable.
Okay, thank you very much, Rob.
Sure.
This was Rob, thank you.
Thank you.